Hi everyone, it's Charlie Webster here, and I hope you're keeping safe and doing okay during these times. I'm really pleased to say that I've got with me Swindon Town's midfielder Michael Doughty for the EFL and Minds Inside the Minds of series for Mental Health Awareness Week. Hey Michael, how are you doing? Thanks for joining
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
I like the hair.
Yeah. I was
long.
I've sort of committed to this thing about not cutting it till we get promoted. So I didn't anticipate sort of a global pandemic. So it's getting quite unbearable, to be honest. But I've even got it in a
you have
man
no
bun.
idea when that's going to be.
Yeah, exactly. It might be like 2021 at this rate. So I'll be like in a man bun until then or something.
How have you been doing anyway during this time?
I think I was once we sort of got our heads around it, I was sort of like really energized and trying to make the most of it, and super busy, fit, like so fit. I was like fitter than I was playing. I was kind of a bit ashamed of myself, to be honest, how fit I got in the first couple of weeks. And then I feel like recently I've just sort of tailed off a little bit. I think it's a little bit of the like fatigue of it all, a little bit more sort of, I don't know, a little bit pent up, ready to sort of get back to life. But I think, up and down mostly. I sort of started off really quite, I wouldn't say excited, but just like it was all new, wasn't it? It was like this whole energy of sort of like wartime and everything, and trying to sort of get prepared. And now I'm at a point where I'm sort of a bit exhausted by it all.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are getting to that stage.
What about yourself? Are you sort
thanks. I'm just I did actually what you did. I think I went a bit mad for exercise and just ran loads. Then last week I went through a stage where I was like, I went for a run and I just couldn't even be bothered to do it. And I was like, why do I feel like this? And then, of course I feel like this. I can't be like feeling amazing all the time. But yeah, I don't know, I feel pretty fit as well. And then I'm a bit like, well, I need to enter a race now because I've like had the time to train properly.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing about it, is usually you're like, I'm always training for a reason. And I know there is still obviously, there is a chance that the season will finish and whatever, but like the longer it's dragging on, the less the reason feels like that prevalent in my mind. I'm like I don't have that sense of competition that, I normally have. I'm like competing against myself, but I've always had like a game or a pre-season or something to sort of like keep myself sort of focused. So I think that's been a challenge really. So it's just trying to like rebase. I'm hoping this sort of week we'll have a bit more clarity on where we stand. So I'm kind of quite desperate for that now.
But in terms of training, do you think, because you have always had that goal, do you enjoy exercise and training? Like have you enjoyed it during this period because it's not been for a game and you're like, oh, I can just exercise for exercise?
You know what? I found a love of running. I think a lot of people have. Like, I've always probably been a bit of a mediocre professional athlete in terms of the athlete, I guess, definition. But I've like, I'm okay at running for a long time in one direction. What I found. It's just when I've got to move side to side is where I get the issue.
Maybe you can take up marathon running.
Yeah, no, I've loved it. I've really loved like the running and being out in nature and just sort of like, putting a podcast on or listening to some music and like just kind of, I guess, kind of clearing my mind, so to speak, and getting the sort of the heart rate up and stuff like that. So I've like really found a love for that. But I do find that naturally, like the competitive kind of beast in me is like still trying to like beat this for the previous time and then the previous time. And I think I've got to a point where like I've just been doing the same thing for so long. Like I need to try and like mix it up a little bit and maybe do some other sort of training, because like there's only so many 5-10Ks that you can do and post on Instagram.
Oh, I'll send you some sessions.
Yeah, please.
Don't worry about that. Yeah, I'm like the interval queen. I post like interval sessions, but they're horrible. They're kind of like, oh yeah, they're horrible.
What,
they're like,
running stuff,
you'll either love me or you'll love me after because you'll feel really good and you'll get that buzz, but you'll absolutely hate me during it. They're like, leg hammering, like I can't feel my legs type ones, but I like them.
I don't think anyone really enjoys the during. It's not like that's why football's so good, is like you can really exercise and not realize you've exercised. I track like some of my data and stuff, and like after a training session I'll be like 1,200 calories and I don't even feel that tired, like, and then I'll do, I don't know, like a 5 or 10k and it will say like 250 calories and I'll be exhausted, and that, like, but I think it's the drug of the feeling afterwards that you get. Just like the during of a run, I've never really enjoyed. It's always that feeling afterwards that I kind of keep coming back for.
I like it. I like it because it clears my mind and it gives me a bit of space that I don't have to think about something, whereas I suppose in football training you're always thinking about something all the time.
I guess so. I don't know, like, I definitely like love the feeling afterwards, but I do sometimes like it's like a weird mental battle, isn't it? It's like you're like,
but that's
don't stop, don't stop, like you're just going through this kind of mad internal dialogue trying to like not give up.
Yep. It's glad to hear that I'm not the only person that does that.
I wake up these weird scenarios against myself, like if you give up you're gonna like not get promoted, or like, I just like try and create these like weird self, I don't know, maybe that's too weird, but I'm like always...
No, I do that too. I'm like, if you can just, if you smash this, then that might happen, and then I'm like, no, don't why am I even thinking like that? And then I also get competitive with other people. I'm not the only person that does that, surely, that I don't even know that I see out.
I'm not really that active on social media, but like, I feel like everyone, it's like been a form of connection in the last few weeks. So like I've been posting some of my workouts on like Instagram and stuff, almost more of as an like accountability for myself, because like once I posted once, and like I feel like I need to post again, and ultimately like if somebody watches it and like goes for a run and stuff and feels the same way that I do, then like that's a good thing. But now I found myself like watching my mates work out and being like, oh, he's like, I saw one of my mates earlier who ran like a sub 18 5k and I was like fuming. Wow. I know. I know. That really quick. And I was like really gutted because I thought I did it quick, and then I saw that and it really put me in my place.
What's your, I don't want to talk about running all day, but what's your 5k time?
I did it in 18:30. That was right.
That is quick though. Come on.
Yeah, it's quick. It's quick for a kid that's never been able to run. So I was quite chuffed with it, and a few of the boys in my team got silenced. So that was a good feeling.
That's ridiculous.
We had a few in Swindon who got sub 18 as well though. So I'm not quite up there.
So what have you been doing with the rest of your team, with the players, to have that camaraderie? Have you been, comparing 5k times and
like we got split up into these like conditioning like mini groups where we all sort of like put in our we've all put in our sort of like data from sessions. We got like a big session pack. I think like most of the teams that I found, like at the beginning no one knew how like it was going to play out, so the clubs did a lot to put the conditioning on, and then the more it sort of transpired and the further away it seemed, they gave us a bit of time off. And it was like weird to be on holiday during a global pandemic. It didn't quite feel like much of a holiday, but we got some time just to like rest. And then we've sort of taken back up the training a little bit in preparation for a potential end to the season. And then I think like most clubs and players, and I'm on a few WhatsApp groups with some other boys, it's like I think everyone's sort of desperate to know where they stand now, because we sort of like been training and then not training, and now we're like ramping up again, but there's no real clarity. So I think hopefully we'll get that sort of finality this week, just either we're finished or we're not going to finish, and everyone can sort of like plan for the worst or the best.
How do you cope with that when things are so uncertain?
I think like everyone else, like sometimes well, sometimes not so well. I found like I was really matter of fact and relaxed about things, kind of a few weeks ago. And then the closer it's got to that deadline, the more anxious I'm feeling. Like this last week, I've been like a bit irritable and just not as grounded as before, and not like, I guess, not as just not as relaxed as I was. I think the closer I've got to it, the more I felt a little bit anxious, because it's like, am I, you're going back into things, you're like, how's it going to look? Am I prepared? How are we going to get tested? Like my wife's pregnant as well. So,
congratulations. But I can imagine that's a weird time, right?
yeah, it's a bit stressful because obviously she's going through a lot, sort of physically as well and sort of internally. So trying to sort of support her, and then the sort of, I guess, the question marks over vulnerability. So I feel like we were in a really good place. I would say like for 2 or 3 weeks, and then the last week, as we get closer to that potential re-emergence from, I guess, isolation to sort of reality, it's just like, how does that look, and how do we go about being normal when things are clearly not normal, you know?
It's all those questions that cause anxiety in a way, because there really isn't many answers sometimes. Is there anything practical that you do when you kind of feel yourself getting anxious and looking ahead when we don't have those answers? Because I think some of the things I've been talking about with people is actually almost just focusing on what you're doing today.
Yeah, I think for me it's really, I don't know, like there's no roadmap, right? You have to sort of take it day by day. And I think when I'm like struggling, you know, obviously having somebody like, you know, my wife next to me, we have an open conversation about something, that sort of helps. You know, if I always find exercise is a huge sort of mental and physical relief for me. Like it's just like always been the place that I go to sort of chill out, or sort of get inspired if I'm lacking motivation. And then I read something recently. It's like worrying is like praying for something bad to happen, and it sort of put that in perspective a little bit for me. It's just like we are only so much in control of anything, right? And it's just like, how do you separate what is real and what isn't? And a lot of the sort of internal dialogue that sometimes will stress me out is essentially me kind of, I guess, praying for something bad to happen. It's like, what if I can't go back to training? What if, and like, you know, all of those things I don't want to be the outcome. So I'm like concentrating my energy and sort of manifesting something that I don't want to happen. So it's just trying to retrain myself to think in a different way if I'm in that headspace, or to like do something which affects that momentum. Because I find that thought process can be sort of quite sort of kind of momentous in a bad way. You can sort of negatively spiral into these like weird scenarios in your mind where you're like, and they're all not real. So it's just like, how do you shift that? And like, it's either you chat to somebody or you do something a bit different that takes, you know, gives you some sort of like endorphin release, and I find that like that's quite helpful, is to turn that momentum into something different.
Do you say anything particular to yourself in those moments, like, it's okay, you know, if I, whatever will happen, you know, I'll be okay? Because it's an interesting way you just put it there. It's almost like you are manifesting negativity because you're like focusing so much on the what if. I think we're all guilty of that. I do that as well. So you're not on your own.
It's weird, right? Because like my wife's always said to me that like I have you know, she's quite into this manifestations and stuff like that, and she always says that I'm, you know, if I think in that headspace, it always materializes. And like a lot of the time it has, and maybe that's just me, or maybe it's the same for everyone, but like I do believe that sort of that mindset and that energy, kind of the energy that you're emitting is what sort of you attract. So I don't think I necessarily say stuff to myself. Maybe that's the next step for me to like improve, is to like learn. But I try to just go to the things that I've always gone to, which seem to have worked, which is like smash out a run, do a workout, you know, chat to somebody like, you know, somebody close, like family, who I can have a really frank conversation with and just say like, I'm feeling like this or that. And I think that sort of helps buck the trend a little bit. And then also I think rest, like when I sleep, nothing is ever the same the next day. And usually when I'm like overtired or I'm feeling a little bit low, like if I just really focus on my rest and like, I don't know, like have a bath and go to bed early and then try and like have a really long sleep, the next day I'll wake up with sort of a renewed perspective and kind of have the opportunity to reset. So yeah, I think I'm not yet at a stage where I can sort of pull myself out of it purely and simply through sort of self-coaching, but that would be cool to get to that point. But I do have some sort of, I think, effective measures to try and reframe the thinking.
Yeah, it's when you said about, you know, about not being in control and uncertainty, and actually that's life anyway. I think that's a really interesting and fascinating point, because we're in this moment where we have all that uncertainty, and I think we convince ourselves that we're in control as a way to cope when we're in normal times. Has there been any times in your life, especially in like football, which is so high pressured, where you struggled in that situation and with mental health?
I think when I left QPR, I was like, I had this like intense, I think, frustration, but also focus to try and like get back to that level of football.
Yeah, because you've just to pause you, sorry, Michael, but you've played across all leagues, right, and all levels of football.
Yeah, I mean, I think I played SPL, Premier League, Championship, League One, League Two, and Conference, and I even had a spell on loan as like a 17-year-old in the Conference South. So although my experience in terms of quantity varies at those levels, like I've had like an opportunity to play at all of them, which has obviously been amazing. But I think being at QPR for so long and sort of being in this cycle of going out on loan, doing well, coming back, like having a little bit of a chance with the first team, but never fully like establishing myself. I really felt like I had something to prove when I left there, and I went to Peterborough, and I think like energetically I was like quite frustrated over sort of that period, and all my mindset was when I left QPR was like, I need to get back to like Championship football to then eventually go back to Premiership, like to kind of fulfill a dream of playing in the Premier League regularly. And I think that was like a real downfall of me, was like focusing on the destination rather than enjoying the journey. And like, sounds a bit of a cliche, but I was really at a point where I was so focused on like this end goal, which I thought would make me happy or feel a sense of achievement, that I kind of forgot what just like playing footy with my mates was all about from such a young age, which has always been like what I've loved, is just like being in the dressing room, enjoying the day-to-day training, trying to get better, trying to achieve, a promotion and all of the things that, we all play football for. I think I was focused on that end goal. And the more I focused on it, the further away I got from it and the less enjoyable it was. And it was like, again, this sort of negative spiral where I wasn't playing well. And it took me a while to get out of that and just to realize that's not how you achieve things. It's to focus on 2 years in advance. You can't just wish away your life. So I try to now just be a bit more grateful for the day-to-day stuff. Like, and I think Corona has really highlighted that. It is how lucky like just playing football is, just how much I miss just going in and training and just being around it with my mates and stuff like that. And that's actually when I played my best football in my life, is when I felt like that anyway. So I think that's what I've learned, certainly from that period, but in also is today, like, that sort of sense of perspective and just to enjoy the everyday, because like you said, like, we're not in control, and when you do think you're in control, life's going to hit you around the face with some global pandemic and remind you that you're only
thanks for that. Yeah. How did you recognize it then? Because I think a lot of people will relate to what you're saying. So how did you recognize it, and how did you, maybe there seems to be a bit of acceptance almost and in who you are and where you are?
I think you've got to go through it, like, ultimately. I mean, obviously I'd love people to be able to, focus, take something from this and sort of prevent that situation occurring. I think for me, I had to go through it. That was part of my journey. I was just, it was a part of my story to get to the point where I am now. And I think it was seeing the difference in achievement personally between how I felt like today and sort of what we're achieving as a club, and the level of football and the performance that I'm putting in, and how I feel today versus kind of how I felt then and the achievements and everything. And I'm just like, these don't add up really. Like, I'm happier, we're doing better, I feel like I'm playing better, and I feel much lighter and relaxed. And there I was like a bit angry, always like you know, I'll have an argument in an empty room type footballer, you know, never my fault type attitude. And I think I was sort of like, you know, I wasn't in that flow or that sort of mindset to achieve anything really. I was sort of kind of self-perpetuating this kind of frustration and whatever. And I think I didn't really necessarily know it in it. It was only until I got to a better place where I sort of realized, you know, that's not, you know, that's not how you get to it, you know, get to any form of success. And what is even success anyway? Do you know what I mean? Like success is that day to day, you know, enjoying waking up every day and having a laugh and making it count.
It's nice to hear, like, you can really feel like your love for football. Was it always that then for you?
It is for everyone really. Like, it's when you're like a kid, you just like mess about and you're like, I remember, you know, being pulled in at like 10 o'clock at night on a summer evening and you're just playing all day, and you know, you don't realize the amount of hours you accumulate. And I've like read this book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, and it's like the path to excellence is like 10,000 hours, and I must have done about 50,000 like when I was, you know what I mean, like I think we all did, anybody who gets to like a professional level of something. And that wasn't because like we were looking for a contract or trying to like get a professional. That was just because you loved it. And it was just, and I do think that football today has become so intense for young players that, you know, you look at some of the best footballers, you know, like Messi and stuff, like doesn't look like pressure's relative. He doesn't look like he faces any pressure because he's just like having a good time and is such a, you know, naturally gifted player. And I think for me, I know that, you know, some people kind of need different things to motivate themselves. You know, I certainly am not like that laid back where I don't feel any pressure, but I do play better when I'm in, you know, a state of enjoyment versus in a state of fear or whatever it's called. Like, you know, I'm certainly more motivated when I'm more relaxed about the game and stuff like that. And I don't think fear helps any situation.
No, I would agree.
Exactly.
Fear actually creates like those behaviors, like you were saying, like the frustration and the anger. You know, it's funny because I've read various different pieces about you and your background. And did you ever struggle with the stereotype maybe of football or footballers, because you tend to have a slightly different background than the average footballer?
I think the short answer is yes, like definitely. Did I acknowledge it at the time? No.
Did you realise it at the time? So just to give
not.
a bit of background, you went to Harrow school and came from
Hogwarts on steroids is what I call it. Yeah.
Hogwarts on steroids.
Yeah.
Why did you actually dress like that as well?
Yeah, it was mad. Like,
did you?
We had like tails and boaters, and it was an incredible place to go to school. But obviously, like I sort of did a podcast recently and we spoke about it a little bit, and it was like weird. I never really fitted in either place at the time, because I was like at a rugby, cricket sort of traditional boarding school playing football at like a decent level, and then at football I was like going to this boarding school which was completely you know, different to my peers at the time. And most people that came through, you know, football academies weren't going to like you know, a Harrow school type facility. So I think it was weird. Like at first I tried to fit in, and then I quickly realized that I didn't fit in like the normal term. And it wasn't like I didn't fit in because I was weird or they were treating me badly. It was just like everybody's different, right? Like, and that's amazing. Like, you know, difference is what makes the world go round. And I think for a long time didn't necessarily know how to handle that type of difference until I just like really accepted it and started to like kind of make the jokes myself, laugh at myself. Like being able to laugh at yourself is such a great quality, like not taking yourself too seriously. You know, there's obviously always a lot of talk about banter and this and stuff, and like banter is a fine line. You've got to be, you know, careful not to sort of overstep the mark with people because you don't know what's going on. But for me, like I just started to embrace that culture and the laughter with my mates, and that, you know, they were trying to, you know, break me down a little bit, but in a positive way. And I think once I started to do that, I felt a lot more comfortable with who I was, and from, coming from that background, and being in, a working class environment that was football, really. But then I think ultimately, like, that's the thing I love about football. It's like a real meritocracy. You're there because you deserve to be. Like, nobody's mortgage is getting paid, nobody's, livelihoods are getting, fulfilled by footballers who don't deserve to be there. It's not like who I know type environment. It's like you're going to be picked at the weekend, and I get picked for Swindon because the manager thinks I'm, the best choice for that game. And I think that's what I always loved about it, was that sort of, that meritocracy, and that feeling of, this is, you've earned it.
So was there never that feeling of being judged then?
I think 100% I felt that, and 1,000,000% I felt that. I felt it from managers, sometimes from other players. Like, there's always people with kind of chips on their shoulders who sort of question what it means to you, because a person from your background, what are your motivations, blah blah blah. So I've always had to work sort of doubly hard to try and break through that. But I was sort of, I think I got to a place where I was working hard to sort of prove them wrong, which can be a good thing, rather than working hard to sort of elevate myself. And like, once I started to realize that their opinion is kind of irrelevant anyway, I got to a much more secure place, which was like, I want to work hard because I want to improve my football career and improve, my colleagues and like friends at football and stuff like that. So I think for a while I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder in response to probably some of their chips on their shoulder. I was trying to, like, stick it to them. And I think that energy for me wasn't positive. I never felt fulfilled if I'd scored a goal and, like, shown the manager something. I always felt like there was another level to go. And I think once I started to sort of channel that energy towards my own sort of success and helping my teammates, and reframing again, like that motivation, I felt a lot better.
Is that what would you say to anybody that has had that or has that right now? And not just about, I suppose about backgrounds, because I think it's interesting, because I'm from the opposite. So I'm from a very low income background, and I think, like, I had a chip on my shoulder too. So I think it's like, it doesn't matter which side you're from, because you're trying to almost prove either stereotype that is wrong, right?
Yeah. I think you never know what's going on in somebody's life, right? Like, I lost my dad obviously at a young age. I was, I might have had a nice upbringing, but I was going through stuff. I was like emotionally, kind of finding stuff challenging, and I think irrespective of where you're from or who you are, blah, 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 like the shortest distance between you and another person is sort of humility, right? And it's like just understanding that, who am I to judge you and know anything about you without even having a chat with you? And I think in a good way, that's hopefully been a great experience and lesson for me and for other people that have met me, is that, like, some Harrovians or boarding school people are pictured like Boris and whatever, and like,
is in Boris Johnson,
like mumbling, like whatever he is, like bumbling along and whatever, and and there's nothing wrong with that. But, like, I'm certainly like a bit of a mongrel, so to speak, and got loads of different parts of my history. So I think judgment is a really sort of toxic emotion anyway. Like, you don't know what anyone's been through or what they're going through, and it can only sort of give you more negativity and I think should be avoided, really, if you can help it.
Michael, you just mentioned your dad, Nigel, who was steeped in football himself, as one of the owners of Nottingham Forest. You mentioned he passed away, was it in 2012?
Yeah, 2012, about 8 years ago now,
Yeah, so, you were, how old were you? Like early 20s?
19, yeah.
19. How did you cope with that?
Yeah.
Because were you very close?
Yeah, he was like my best mate. We really had a great relationship. He was my agent at the time, football wise, which he enjoyed. It was quite funny actually. And I think, he was living a bit vicariously through me in terms of like, son playing football, blah, blah, blah. Him having obviously a huge passion for football. And coping is a weird word as well. It was like, I didn't feel like, you're in it at the time and you make these decisions and you just sort of crack on with it because that's what we've been taught to do. And I think I didn't necessarily comprehend the scale of that personally, like how that would affect me and maybe some of my actions. And in a way, like I actually played really well in that first year. I kind of came back to QPR and sort of buried my head in football. And didn't necessarily, I think, kind of deal with some of the emotions of losing somebody who, obviously I cared about. And I think in the circumstances, losing somebody is never easy. But when you've just like left school, and it was such a sudden sort of death in terms of the nature of it, it was pretty intense. And I think I sort of cope with it through kind of sport and trying to give myself focus. But I think it was only really until like quite a few years later that I started to make peace with that sort of experience, and became more sort of, I think, more relaxed about who I was and dealing with that sort of that grief process, which is obviously quite like a difficult thing to go through for anyone, really.
Yeah, I can imagine. How much did he influence you?
Yeah, it was, he was, I think like hopefully most father-son relationships, it was, we spent all of my childhood going to like Nottingham Forest games. He used to take me to football along with my mum at weekends. He would call me every day, chat about things when I wasn't with him, always push me, give me kind of bits of information and knowledge and stuff like that too. And I think I was heavily reliant on him, probably more than maybe most kids, for like kind of stewardship, because I was going through a difficult time where I was like kind of at this boarding school trying to be a professional footballer. And he always like reassured me that you'll be fine, just crack on, and I think that was a difficult thing, was losing that direction. But it was also a positive thing in the sense that that's one thing that I've learned from it, is that you shouldn't, you can depend on yourself and you have the right tools and the right things to sort of get through anything. So I've learned to be a lot more self-sufficient and decisive and trust my instincts, etc. So I think with everything, life is, you're never in control. That's going back to that message, right?
Yeah, I think that's the theme of this one.
Yeah, like we're all
don't worry about it, you're never in control anyway.
We're all here on borrowed time, really. So it's just like trying to make the most of it. And I think that perspective has really helped eventually shape me. Like I wasn't there immediately, but now I'm just, who needs more messages than sort of losing somebody close to you, a global pandemic, to try and get out there and make the most of life and not take yourself too seriously, really.
How important then do you think it is that like we have conversations like this, and you talked about the honest conversations that you have with your wife and your friends about how we feel?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely like fundamental to who you are. Like I don't think you can be a fully functioning person without that outlet, because there's no doubt that as I've got older, I've become so much more aware of that voice in my head. I don't ever recognize that at 12, 13, 18, 19, really. And as you get older and you become, I guess, more aware, different pressures, you need an outlet. Everybody needs that. And I think, I'm much more open to these discussions now, because it's part of being a human being, is the way that I see it. And if you don't, I don't see how you can function properly, because it's so intense. Like life's intense. It's intense for everyone, right? It's like everyone's got their pressures, job, family, and to just internalize that, I don't think is a good place, both from a biological, physical point of view or a sort of a mental point of view.
And you're an on your side champion for Mental Health Awareness Week, with the partnership with EFL and Mind. So, I mean, why is that so important to you?
Well, I've only recently become part of the charity. Obviously, I've become quite aware of their presence within football, and I think in the last year to 18 months, I've started to think, maybe as I got a bit older, about trying to use what small platform I have to have a good impact. I think that's from a selfish point of view, is it makes me feel better, it's good. Yeah.
And so what would you say to people out there that maybe are struggling at the moment?
I think first of all, just let it out in whichever way that you're comfortable, and sort of that might be through a bit of exercise, for people that are capable of exercising and stuff like that. That's always been a great channel for me to stay active. And then from a conversational point of view, reach out to people close to you, somebody you feel comfortable with, have a chat with them, break down that initial fear of what that conversation will look like, going through something similar. Because if they're not, then they're probably a robot. So avoid robots. And then if that's not possible, I think if you can't exercise or you can't speak to somebody and you're feeling a bit isolated, there's obviously a number of charities out there with helplines to have a conversation with. And I think those initial conversations will start to sort of loosen the load a little bit and make you feel less isolated in whatever you're going through.
Thank you so much. It's been really great talking to you.
Cheers. I hope it wasn't too boring. I always get a little bit insecure at the end of it, I've babbled a lot in these.
No, you're not selfish and you're not boring.
Thanks. Cheers.
No, it's really, really interesting and great to speak to you, and you can see that real acceptance and understanding about yourself and your own mental health, which I personally think is how you actually feel mentally well, to be honest.
Yeah, and I do think as well, sometimes these pods or conversations like this can feel I don't know, not preachy, but that I've sussed it out or I'm feeling great all the time. And I think the acknowledgement I have is that I do feel stressed. Today I've been a bit stressed, to be honest, just not knowing what the future is in terms of football and being a little bit on edge. And I think as long as you accept that that's a normal process, not to feel there's this nirvana of you're a monk in a temple or whatever that. Some people aren't able to achieve that, and it's hard in day-to-day life. But as long as you can have the kind of coping mechanisms to speak about things once you do get into that space, and I think that's important, because there's one thing looking at people talking about mental health and then being well, I'm never going to get to that point. But I do think everybody is still day-to-day dealing with it, and it's just how you cope with it, I guess.
And what even is that point anyway? Because you said, it's one of the things that's helped me is accepting some days I'm not going to feel great and some days I might, and that's nothing to do with coronavirus. That's just
Exactly.
life. And sometimes and you said it's almost if you can recognize, you said you're feeling a bit stressed today, and thanks for doing this when you're feeling stressed. It's oh yeah, well, I feel stressed today, and almost just accepting it and recognizing it rather than trying to battle it, because it's almost that battle that makes you feel even worse.
Oh, it's no good when you're just not having a good day and you're trying to kind of crack on and sort of, I guess, suppress that feeling. I wouldn't say I feel like that all the time, but there'd just be sometimes a couple of days in a month I just might be feeling a bit off or a bit anxious or a bit this, and I just think it's it's relatively normal, if not incredibly normal. And I think the acceptance of that sort of ebb and flow of life is a really important thing as well, because I don't think there ever really is a sort of constant emotional kind of linear journey that you go through. There is constant, you know, work on yourself, just like there is on the field, fitness wise. You know, you know, that's I guess what makes it fun. Life is the variation.
Thank you. I think that's a very nice way to end.